O'Neill remains the crowning achievement of the Provincetown Players, but as his friend and associate Kenneth McGowan has pointed out, they found their justification outside of O'Neill in the creative spirit which the playhouse breathed on all who came within it. Applauding how their work spread beyond their home on McDougall Street, Henderson writes, "For all the little theaters that came after it, both in New York and abroad in the land, it represented and continues to represent the apogee of what can be achieved by an inspired band of amateurs." 70 years after McGowan's statement, American cultural critic Robert M. Crunden proposed, "The summer of 1916, when the Players solidified their existence, may well have been the most important few weeks in the history of the American theater, and certainly remains exceptional, even in the much broader perspective of American modernism." In 2013, Todd London, the artistic director of New Dramatists, wrote that the Players were the birth of an experimental art theater upon whose foundations so many of our later companies would stand. Theater scholar C.W.E. Bigsby proposes that, on November 3, 1916, Bound East for Cardiff opened not only the first New York season of the Provincetown Players, but also the history of 20th-century American drama. Many scholars like these have concurred and unequivocally affirmed the Provincetown Players' monumental importance to American theater. Perhaps the figure who's drawn the most diverse scrutiny, and about whom there has been the most disagreement, is the Players' leader and founder, George Cram Cook. He is a complex figure, to be sure, yet his presence is seminal in every aspect of the Players. Partial views of the man and incomplete accounts of his influences often obscure his part in the Players' artistic and organizational decisions. One of the major items that this study investigates is George Cram Cook's legacy as the leader of the Provincetown Players, and why, after a successful and significant career in other arenas, particularly as a writer and a critic, he would take on the creation and development of an experimental theater company. After years of researching and writing about the Players' work, I was compelled to find out what motivated Cook and what he saw as the potential outcomes of starting a theater collective. How could it be worth the sacrifice? I wondered how Cook made his goals seem so significant that he could spark within some of the most radical minds and successful writers and artists in America the desire to create an amateur theater with no financial payoff in sight. What was it about that time in America's cultural and political life, and in the bohemian freedoms pursued in New York City's Greenwich Village, that would make it the perfect incubator for a little theater like the Provincetown Players to have an impact? I also wanted to know what in the trajectory of Cook's life prepared him to take on the unlikely task of starting a theatrical venture in his 40s, when he had not been much more than a spectator of theater to that point.